James Doolittle, the pilot who changed war forever. April 1942. 16 bombers sat on a carrier deck. Everyone said it was impossible. Doolittle had 467 feet of runway, bombers needed 200. His crew thought he was crazy. Tokyo thought they were safe, but what happened next shocked the entire world. This wasn't just a mission, it was revenge and Doolittle's plan. It would terrify Japan's high command and change the course of World War II forever. April 18, 1942. Lieutenant Colonel James Doolittle stood on the deck of the USS Hornet. He looked at 16 B-25 bombers lined up behind him. Everyone in the Navy said this mission couldn't be done. Bombers this big had never taken off from an aircraft carrier before. They needed at least 1,200 feet of runway to get airborne. The Hornet's deck? Only 467 feet. But Doolittle wasn't listening to the doubters. 4 months earlier, Japan had attacked Pearl Harbor. America wanted revenge, and Tokyo believed they were completely safe from American bombers. They thought the distance was too far. They thought their island was protected. They were wrong. Doolittle had spent weeks training his crews for something nobody thought possible. He stripped the bombers down. Removed every piece of equipment they didn't absolutely need. Extra fuel tanks were installed everywhere, but there was still one massive problem nobody had solved. Could these heavy bombers actually take off from such a short distance? The mission was born from desperation. President Roosevelt wanted to hit back at Japan. He wanted to show America wouldn't just sit back and take it, but there was a huge problem. Japan was too far away. American bombers based in Hawaii couldn't reach Tokyo and make it back. The distance was simply too great. Every military planner looked at the maps and said the same thing. Impossible. Then someone had a crazy idea. What if they launched bombers from an aircraft carrier, get the carrier close enough to Japan, launch the planes, bomb Tokyo, then fly to China and land there? It had never been attempted before. The Navy picked Doolittle to lead the mission. He was 45 years old. A test pilot. An engineer. A man who understood machines better than almost anyone alive. He had set speed records. Won air races. Earned a doctorate in aeronautical engineering from MIT. If anyone could figure out how to launch a bomber from a carrier deck, it was Doolittle. But even he wasn't sure it would work. Doolittle gathered 80 men. All volunteers. He couldn't tell them where they were going. He couldn't tell them what the target was. He just told them it would be dangerous. Extremely dangerous. Every single man volunteered anyway. They trained in Florida, practicing short takeoffs over and over again. The pilots had to get their bombers off the ground in less than 500 feet day after day. They practiced. The bombers shook violently as they struggled into the air. One wrong move and the plane would stall, crash into the ground, but slowly, the crews got better. Meanwhile, Doolittle worked on another problem. Weight. Every extra pound made takeoff harder. Every extra pound meant less fuel. They removed the bottom gun turrets. Took out the heavy radio equipment. Even removed the co-pilot's seat cushions. Then they loaded the planes with extra fuel tanks. In the bomb bay. In the crawl space. Everywhere they could fit them. The bombers would carry more fuel than they were designed for, but would it be enough to reach China after bombing Tokyo? Nobody knew for sure. On April 2, 1942, the USS Hornet left San Francisco. On its deck sat 16 B-25 bombers. Strapped down tight, the aircraft carrier headed west into the Pacific Ocean. Most of the Navy crew didn't know where they were going. The mission was top secret. Only the captain and a few officers knew the truth. They were sailing straight toward Japan. The plan was simple but risky. Get within 400 miles of Japan. Launch the bombers at night. Hit Tokyo at dawn. The bombers would drop their bombs and keep flying west to China. The friendly Chinese forces would help them land safely, but the mission depended on surprise. If Japan spotted the carrier early, everything would fall apart. Japanese fighters would be waiting, the bombers would be shot down, the Hornet itself might be attacked and sunk. For 2 weeks, the carrier sailed across the Pacific. The bomber crews waited nervously. They practiced their procedures. Checked their planes. Tried not to think about what could go wrong. Then on April 18, everything changed. A Japanese patrol boat spotted the American fleet. The carrier was still 650 miles from Japan. That was 250 miles farther than planned. The bombers barely had enough fuel to reach Tokyo from 400 miles away, from 650 miles. It was nearly impossible, but Admiral Halsey made the call. Launch now or abort the entire mission. If they waited, Japanese fighters would find them. Doolittle ran to his bomber. The sea was rough. Waves crashed over the carrier's deck, the ship pitched up and down in the swells. Wind howled across the flight deck. These were the worst possible conditions for takeoff. Doolittle climbed into the cockpit, started the engines, and Navy sailors pulled away the wheel chocks. The deck officer stood at the bow, holding signal flags. The carrier turned into the wind. Picked up speed. Doolittle pushed the throttles forward. The bomber began to roll. 467 feet of deck. That's all he had. The deck officer dropped his flag. Doolittle released the brakes. The bomber accelerated down the deck. Faster. Faster. The end of the carrier rushed toward him, then the deck officer's flag went down and Doolittle pulled back on the controls. The bomber dropped off the end of the carrier. For a heart-stopping moment, it fell toward the ocean. Then the engines caught full power. The plane climbed. Doolittle was airborne. Behind him, 15 more bombers followed. One by one, they roared down the deck. Every single one made it into the air. Not one crashed. The impossible had just happened. The 16 bombers formed up and headed west. They flew just 200 feet above the ocean. Staying low. Staying under Japanese radar for 5 hours, they flew toward Tokyo. At noon, they reached the Japanese coast. Doolittle climbed to 1,500 feet below him. He could see Tokyo, the capital city of Japan. People walked in the streets. Cars drove by. Nobody looked up. Nobody expected American bombers over Tokyo. Air raid sirens didn't sound. Fighter planes didn't scramble. Doolittle lined up on his target. Opened the bomb bay doors. The bombardier pressed the release button. 4,500-pound bombs dropped from the plane. They fell toward a factory complex below. Then came the explosions. Tokyo was under attack. All 16 bombers hit their targets. Some struck military facilities. Others hit factories and industrial areas. The Japanese were caught completely off guard. But now came the hard part. Getting out alive. The bombers turned west and flew toward China. Japanese fighter planes finally scrambled into the air, but most of Doolittle's bombers were already gone. The problem was fuel. The early launch meant they didn't have enough to reach the Chinese airfields. As they flew over the ocean, pilots watched their fuel gauges drop lower and lower. Some planes wouldn't make it to land. Darkness fell. The bombers flew through rain and clouds. Pilots couldn't see where they were going. They had no radio contact with the Chinese airfields. One by one, the planes began running out of fuel. Doolittle's plane ran dry over the Chinese mountains. The engines quit. He ordered his crew to bail out. In complete darkness, they jumped into the night. Parachutes opened. The men drifted down through rain and clouds. They had no idea what was below them. Would they land in Japanese-occupied territory? All 16 bombers were lost. 11 crews made it to safety in China. Chinese villagers helped them hide from Japanese patrols, but not everyone survived. 3 men died in crashes. 8 were captured by Japanese forces. 3 of those captured men were executed. 1 died in prison. The rest spent years in brutal POW camps. Doolittle thought the mission was a failure. He'd lost all his planes. Lost men under his command. He expected to be court-martialed when he got home. Instead, he was awarded the Medal of Honor. The raid did minimal physical damage to Tokyo, but the psychological impact was enormous. Japan realized their home islands weren't safe. They pulled back fighter planes from other areas to defend Tokyo. It changed their entire war strategy. More importantly, it gave Americans hope. After Pearl Harbor, America needed a victory. Doolittle gave them one. The man who said it couldn't be done had done it anyway. He'd bombed Tokyo and lived to tell about it. James Doolittle became a hero. But he never forgot the men who didn't make it home. James Doolittle's daring mission changed World War II aviation history forever. The Tokyo bombing raid proved America could strike back after Pearl Harbor retaliation. This legendary pilot and his B-25 bomber crew accomplished what seemed impossible. Their courage inspired millions. Want more incredible World War II stories? Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Drop a comment telling us which legendary World War II pilots we should cover next. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.